Go ahead and open your Bibles to 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2 is the first passage we're going to be looking at in just a moment. First Peter chapter 2. Now, imagine that you lived in a neighborhood where all your neighbors were allowed to come look into your windows and see all the details about your life. And they could do that whenever they wanted and as long as they wanted. And you were allowed to go look in your neighbors' windows, and that was considered normal. You could control what windows people are able to look in, and others can control what you're able to look in. And so if you wanted to, you could close off parts of the rooms that you don't want anybody to see. But part of the requirement of this neighborhood is to always leave some windows open so that people can stand outside and look in your house whenever they want. And that means they can watch you eat breakfast, they can watch you play with your kids, they can watch you watch TV, they can watch you read a book, or they can watch you change light bulbs, or whatever it is. And not only can they watch and hear you, but they also can leave feedback about what they're seeing, and they can put their comments in your mailbox regarding what they think about your life and how you do things and what you look like and what's going on in your house. Now, it might be kind of interesting if you're the one looking into somebody's house, but having someone look into your house and knowing that would be a little weird and uncomfortable. Now, other people, they might seem to live more exciting lives than you. They might have nicer things than you do. They might, you might even hear conversations through the glass that you don't have conversations like that at your own house. And so you might get a lot of new information and new content to watch and listen to. You know, the truth is, this kind of neighborhood would be a mixture of both, you could say, creepiness and entertainment. And there might be some benefits to it, but the benefits would be probably eclipsed by the cons. But did you know that literally billions of people live in a neighborhood like that? It's just that it's not a physical neighborhood. It's a digital neighborhood called social media. Now, I'm certainly not here to say that social media is all bad. But I think we can all agree that there are a lot of dangers and traps that are unhealthy for social media that the Christian needs to be aware of and needs to understand how Satan will try to get us to do sinful things on Facebook, or if they're not sinful, at least they're completely foolish and bordering on sinful. There are 3 billion Facebook users in the world. 3 billion. The technical answer is 3.03 billion, but 3 billion. That's almost half the people in the world. The population, last I checked, is pushing 8 billion. And so if there's 3 billion, somewhere around 40% or so of the world is on Facebook. And that's not counting all the other social media platforms like Instagram and Twitter and whatever else people are using these days. However we want to slice it, social media is a big presence in most people's lives today, and especially America. In America, back in 2016, according to surveys, about 79% of Americans had a Facebook user profile. Now that has dropped since then to about 68 or 69% now. And some of that may be because a lot of people have noticed the unhealthy things about social media and have been kind of repulsed by it and not used it nearly as much. A 2017 report found that the average person will spend approximately 116 minutes per day on social media. It's almost 2 hours per day just scrolling and looking around on social media. That's a big chunk of time. What do you use 2 hours a day for, other than work? Now, there's a lot of great things about sites like Facebook. You know, they allow you to keep up with your friends. They allow you to keep up with your family or your church. They allow you to communicate with people easier and share positive experiences together. They kind of facilitate social interaction if they're used well, but there's a lot of bad things about it as well. And in 1 Peter chapter 2, that's the passage I asked you to open up. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 12, it says, "Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation." Well, there's a sense in which if you are present on any social media, you are in the presence of Gentiles or pagans. And so, as Christians, we have to talk about our behavior and actions on social media and what we should think about it and how we should think about it from a biblical perspective. I called this sermon "Sinning on Facebook," or another title I have given it is "Using Facebook or social media wisely." And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Now notice this little cartoon here. You got the guy on the left saying, he says, "I've got hundreds of Facebook friends I've never met." And then kind of the older guy says, "Well, when I was young, we called them imaginary friends." You know, there's something about Facebook that's kind of makes things feel more real than they really are. There's a thing about the internet that, can be kind of delusionary as far as make us think and sense that this stuff is happening in real life, or you're building all these connections in real life, but really it's just on a hard drive somewhere. And at the end of the day, without the hard drive, you don't really have those connections. So we're going to talk about 4 main sins, I think, that are easy to do on Facebook and sins that we need to watch out for. And the first one, probably the most obvious one, is just sharing sinful content or sharing content that has explicit sin in it. So this might be something like sharing a post or a meme or whatever with curse words or language that is not conducive to a Christian. So Ephesians chapter 5, Paul talks about how our language should be. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 3 and 4. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 3 and 4, it says, "But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving." Now notice the contrast there. On the one hand, you have lewd jokes, crude joking. What else does he say? Foolish talk or foolish banter, filthiness. Those are all things that apparently happen in the speech level. And he's saying, hey, this happens, this is what the world does. But Christians need to be different in how they talk. So that's on the one hand. In contrast to that, he says, but instead, let there be what? Thanksgiving. Now think about that. Thanksgiving or gratefulness is kind of the antidote to foolish talk and crude joking and so on and so forth. Ephesians 5, verses 11 through 12. A couple passages down here, it says, in Ephesians 5, verses 11 and 12, it says, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them, for it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret." And so while we're using social media, we need to watch out for what we share and what we post and what we content that other people have made that we help make available to more people. Sometimes from the things people post, you think, did they really read that, or did they really look at that very closely? And so it's just something to be aware of as we navigate on these type of sites. The second sin I want to talk about tonight that's pretty frequent on Facebook is, you could say, jealousy. And this kind of comes in two main forms, I think. The first one is what you might call Facebook jealousy, or what some people call that. According to one study, it was reported that the incidence of ex-partners or ex-spouses or ex-girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever, the incidence of them stalking their ex on a social media platform was like 50% of the people. 50% of the people who had an ex reported that there were verified incidents where they were being stalked by them. You think about that. Why would someone who is broken up with somebody or divorces or whatever, they have this relationship and then it's severed and it's sour? Why would they be stalking someone on Facebook or Instagram or whatever? Because they want to know what's happening in that person's life. They want to get as many clues as possible from the internet that they can to see, is that person running around with somebody else? Who are the friends that person is hanging around? And it can become obsessive. And that can become jealousy. And it's a total waste of time, is not constructive, does not help anything, and just leads to more and more resentment. Another type of jealousy on Facebook and social media is what I guess either the Gen Xers or the millennials have called FOMO, which means fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. Now, what form does this take on social media platforms? Well, this type of jealousy may occur when you realize that your friends, or people who thought you were your friends, they're doing something fun or going to an event or whatever, and they didn't invite you. And now you're in the position of thinking, well, why did they invite me? I like to do that kind of stuff. I thought we were close. why did they not invite me? Why are they posting pictures of these other people in the friend group? And no one told me about it. Well, that can spark some jealousy. And so these type of things, and you feel like I'm missing out. I'm losing an experience by being with them instead. And that can delve into jealousy. And then some people might get so angry or frustrated about feeling left out that you're stuck imagining the good times that those people are having, or you can actually see what they're doing in their uploaded photos or videos or whatever. And then perhaps you're tempted to resort to posting a fake update about how fun you're having, how good of a time you're having without them. And then what you do is you have fallen into jealousy, and you've also fallen into lying. All because of something you saw on social media. And that was the stimuli, the thing that got you going. We've got to be careful of these type of things. One thing we've got to remember is that if people are posting about how much fun they're having at an event, while they're at the event, where it's supposed to be so fun, maybe it's not as fun as they're leading on it to be. Because if it was really fun, they'd probably be very distracted by how fun it was, and enjoyable it was. But we gotta be realistic when we're observing what's posted on social media, or it can take over us and destroy us and destroy our soul. The third one is the one that I want to spend the most time on tonight, is pride. You see pride on social media websites quite a bit. And it's probably one of the ones that is most blatant and most obvious, except to the people who are the most prideful. But it doesn't always come in just clear, straightforward things that we might consider prideful behavior. It comes in more subtle forms. So we're going to look at some passages that talk about pride, and we're going to talk about how these prideful motivations or attitudes kind of manifest themselves through Facebook and other social media accounts. Well, here's some. Facebook one-upmanship. This is when you feel the need to write something clever or exciting in order to stay relevant or popular. Now, this might be a special temptation for someone who dubs themselves an influencer. You know, people nowadays are calling themselves influencers, and what that means usually is you have created so much content on a social media platform or website that you have gotten a lot of followers to the point where the website starts paying you, or advertisements start paying you just to make more content because it's getting so many eyeballs. And once you get to that point, then money becomes a factor. And so you got to keep the content fresh. You got to keep it coming because they're paying you to do this now. And there's a lot of pressure that can come from that. So you got to constantly be thinking, oh, what can I say next? What can I point to next? How can I word this to make people want to see this, see how I say this as opposed to how somebody else says this? Or what picture can I post that will get the most likes or get the most views? And it becomes pride. becomes all about you. And questions like, well, how can I use what I'm about to post to help people? How can I encourage people with these pictures? How these pictures help people to come to Christ or be a good, better person or be more inspired in their life to live out and treat people well and all of that? No, it's more, what do people want to see? And what do people want to read? And what's going to get the most clicks? That's dangerous territory there. You got to be watching out. Now, most of us probably never get to the point where we can actually say we're an influencer on Facebook. But I bet you've seen people who think they're influencers when they don't really get that many following. And so it's easy for this stuff to go to our heads. We make a little clever post, get about 50 likes, that can go to our head. We got to be careful about that. TMI, too much information. You know those times when someone asks, just in passing, just because it's a thing to say, how are you doing? And then they start going into real big detail about how their foot fungus is still growing and it's itching all the time. It's causing them a hard time to get back to sleep at night, and that reminds them of how their back's hurting at night while their foot's itching, and then oh yeah, they got to go to the doctor next Wednesday to figure it out what's going on, and they go on and on and on. You're like, whoa. When I said how are you doing, I didn't necessarily mean, how are you doing? And we kind of all know that. But sometimes that's what we call TMI. Okay, too much information. This kind of can happen on Facebook and social media. When two people decide to have a personal conversation through a public avenue, instead of just direct messaging, giving them direct messages and talk about it privately one-on-one. And you kind of see this sometimes. Usually, now sometimes people who are users of Facebook or social media or whatever, they don't know how it all works. And so they might click one button and think it's doing something else, and then people see it and go, oh, what the my wife's grandmother one time, she put in the status bar, she thought it was the search bar, and she put cornbread recipes and then post. That was the status. So sometimes people don't exactly know what button's which and all that, so you got to keep that in mind when you're observing from the outside. But there's sometimes when people they talk to each other, and you're like, you could do that in private, right? But the fact that they do it on the public format kind of shows they want other people to see for some reason. Not sure why exactly that will be. It'll be different for different people. But sometimes that can come across as petty. It can come across as attention-seeking. It can come across as all these characteristics that you don't want to be. You don't want people to think you are. Another is oversharing status updates. Again, it's all about me, my life. My life is so important that everybody needs to know all the details going on in my life and all the exciting stuff going on in my day-to-day living. There's nothing wrong with posting here and there for fun. Hey, we're at this restaurant, look at this cool food. Or thing. But when you make it something that you're doing constantly all the time, maybe we need to back up and think, why am I posting this so much? what is resulting from this? What am I getting out of it, and what am I giving to people? And we got to ask ourselves the question, do people really need to know this? Do they want to know this that bad? Or am I kind of have this imagination that people want to know this about my life? And it always takes self-reflection. Now, with a lot of these things, there's not hard and fast rules. You can't point to a Bible passage and say, well, never do this. But once you can kind of see patterns and behavior that is ongoing, you need to start asking yourself, why am I doing this? What is the purpose here? Is it about me, or is it about others, and most importantly, is it about God? And then another form of pride is you're trying to kind of mine a liking spree, what some people might call a liking spree. That's whenever you're trying to make something where it gets a bunch of likes, and then you make something else fast that gets a bunch of likes again, or gets a bunch of comments, or whatever. And maybe it can be provocative, it can be controversial, it can be, whatever it can be, you're thinking, your goal is likes. Because when you post something, it's kind of hard to forget you posted it. For most people, I think. And you keep going back and looking at the notification bar. Did anybody respond? Did anybody like it? Oh, I've got 5 likes. Who were they? Click. Oh, it was this, that, and the other person. Well, why did Betty like it? I know she was on here. I saw her like this other thing just 5 minutes ago. Well, why did she like it? And you start getting into this petty, prideful space where it's all about you again. Self-pity. Look at Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 14, it says, "Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain." So he's saying, don't complain. And then he gives reasons for why he doesn't want people to complain. He doesn't want Christians to complain. And a lot of it has to do with your reputation and how people view you. And complaining is kind of a cheap way to get attention. And while there's a lot of people who might come to the aid of someone who complains or talks about how hard their life is and all of that, there's a lot of people that see that as, hey, everybody's life is hard. Give us some positive stuff here. Or why should we care about your trials as opposed to everybody else's trials? I'm not saying that's a right way to think either, but that's how a lot of people think. And so we have to be careful and mindful of how things are going to look to people that we don't even know are going to see the post and see the content on our social media accounts. But you got this self-pity is one of these manifestations, and sometimes it can come across as like a cryptic post that somebody makes about how they're feeling, but they give no details. For example, they could say, "I'm so sick of this!" ! And that's about it. And what that does is, that's the post you see. And what that does is, makes you curious. Well, what are you sick of? And why are you so sick of it? And so if you're a sympathetic person, you might be drawn to ask more questions and get more details about what's going on. And you say, well, what's wrong? And they might say, well, nothing. Well, what was the point of posting that? I'm so sick of this. Was it because you want help? Or when the help comes, why don't you take advantage of it? Or are you just wanting people to feel sorry for you? You know, there's a sense in which knowing that people feel sorry for us can kind of make us feel better. But it's not something we see in the Bible that we're supposed to be doing. And there's a lot of sinful behavior that can be subtle and small and make us feel better, at least for a little bit, at least for a moment. But the thing with sin is sin is always destructive for the long term. And how are the self-pity posts and comments going to affect your life for the long term of your life? Or are you just trying to feel better in the moment? And we always got to remember, who is this about? Me or others or God? Another one is when people try to come across as smarter than you know that they are, and they know that they are. Look at Proverbs chapter 18. Proverbs chapter 18. Proverbs 18, verse 13, it says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. What a lot of times happens on Facebook, especially when you get into more like controversial discussions and political discussions or religious issues or whatever, people will just kind of see very quickly what's posted or what's being referred to in the post, and they have a comment right away, and they have this big response, and it's like, did you even take time to like think about what was said? Did you take time to try to verify the story that was said? Or are you just trying to show everybody, this is how much knowledge I have about this issue? And let me tell you what I think about it. What's going on? What's the motives here? What's the purpose? Where is this coming from? And sometimes you might have good motives to respond to somebody on Facebook, especially when it's the more religious type discussions. But there are warnings in Proverbs about discussing things with a fool. Now, there are times in Proverbs where it tells us that we need to talk to fools, and there are other places that warn us of the disastrous effect it can have on ourselves when we talk to fools. And so you got to balance that. It's not that you never talk to fools or never answer fools, but you got to know here's the drawbacks of responding to fools. So let's look at some of those in Proverbs here. Proverbs chapter 23 in verse 9. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 9, it says, do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the good sense of your words. Now, you think there might be a little bit of fools on the Facebook world out there? This is a good passage to keep in mind. Do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the good sense of your words. The thing about social media is that you're speaking in the presence of basically everybody in the entire world. The entire world, they could get access to it if they come across it. And so you got to ask yourself, do I want the entire world to see this? Look at chapter 26, Proverbs 26 and verse 4. Proverbs 26 and verse 4. Here it says, answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Now he's warning of a danger of getting in a dialogue with what he calls a fool, a person who is foolish, because a lot of times they'll take you down with you. And you respond to them in like a what you think might be a helpful way, and they totally miss it. And they start giving attacks to you, or giving ad hominems to you, or they're bitter about something or whatever, and then that makes you mad and frustrated, and you're tempted to say, I'm going to show you. And then before the end of it, there's this long thread going back and forth, and people have no idea what's going on, or see it and be like, man, what in the world's going on here? These people are really mad at each other. I can't even tell what's happening. And before you know it, both of you look like a fool to a passerby. You got to think about that. Look at chapter 29, verse 9. Chapter 29, verse 9. It says, if a wise man has an argument with a fool, the fool only rages and laughs, and there is no quiet. Now, this is not so much telling us don't ever talk to fools, but it's more of giving kind of a awareness. Okay, when you talk to fools, this is something that typically happens, so be prepared for it. Don't be surprised when it happens. There's going to be a lot of laughing and mocking, and it's going to disturb you. If you're a person that at least kind of sensitive in any way, it's going to be disturbing, it's going to be distressing. Understand that before you go into it. And you got to use wisdom to decide, is this something that's productive here to engage in this? Or is it not? Who is seeing it? What's it going to benefit? Who's going to benefit from it? Is it going to do is it going to do more good or harm here in this context? And that's always the thing with social media. Social media, you don't have the chance to clarify yourself very well. You don't know all the people who've seen it. And if you're going to clarify yourself, you don't know who exactly to let everybody know who to clarify to, because you don't know who's seen it in the first place. And so if someone doesn't see the clarification, but they saw the original statement, and then they can go on and think that you think or said something that you didn't really mean or say. And so there's a lot going on social media. Showing off your good deeds. Showing off your good deeds. Now look at Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Matthew 6, verses 1 through 4. It says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who's in heaven. That's a pretty strong statement. Don't do this thing, because if you do, God's going to take away your reward. in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, so he's going to give examples of practicing your righteousness before people who can see you. Thus, when you give to the needy, don't sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. You know, something about giving alms to people or charity or whatever, to do it in a secret fashion or a secret method where you're going to get no praise or no recognition for it or anything, to do it in that way usually takes a lot of faith. It takes faith that God is going to see it. And God is going to recognize it. And so sometimes when we try to parade and advertise our good deeds, that might show we need to work on our faith. If we need people to acknowledge our good deeds and see it and witness it, in order to feel like it really happened, in order to feel good, like I did something good here. If we're dependent on that, what does it say about our faith? That God sees us and God witnesses us. Let me give you some examples here that happen on Facebook. Usually the way that showing off your good deeds on Facebook or social media happens is what people call a humble brag. A humble brag. By humble brag, that word usually used like in context where someone is like bragging information about themselves or their accomplishment of something, but they do it in a way that sounds humble, if you know what I mean. So let me give you some examples. There was an actor who tweeted this not too long ago. He said, "Just won GQ Style Award in Germany. Obviously, they made a mistake. I wonder how long till they come take it back, winky face." What's going on there? He's the one who advertised, "I won GQ Style of the Year in Germany." But then he tried to make a joke about it. But what's the point of bringing it up? Because he wants people to know he won GQ Style of the Year. Another guy tweeted this once. He said, "I would be the worst at The Price is Right. I brought $20K to buy a monitor, computer monitor, but it was only $350. And then he tagged a lady named Manda Letherman, and he said, "Manda Letherman can vouch for how clueless I am with prices." It's like, okay, so what you're telling us is you're rich. You bring $20,000 cash to a Best Buy or wherever it is that you're going because you're so out of touch with prices that you think a monitor might be $20,000. But he's doing it in a way that's like, "Oh man, I'm super rich, but I'm stupid too." And you can see past it. Here's another example that someone gave. This is kind of more, you could say, closer to home as a Christian. And this is a back and forth posting. This person sends a message to this person, says, "So what has made you smile this weekend?" "I'd say mine is volunteering for the Tim Tebow prom for mental disabilities." Then someone responded and said, "Oh, that's cool, but how's your arm?" And she says, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Oh, I thought you broke it patting yourself on the back so hard." and so it comes across as like, I'm going to tell you about a great experience I had volunteering my time and doing a bunch of good deeds. That was fun. And so they couch it in a way that's like socially acceptable. If they just had come straight out and said, I'm a really good person because I volunteered at this mental disabilities thing over here the other day, they know that's not socially acceptable. So people who want to get attention like this and want to brag about what they do, they word it in such a way that a lot of people will be like, oh, that's funny, or that's interesting. But what's the motives here? What's going on in the heart? Look at Proverbs chapter 27. Proverbs chapter 27. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 2. Proverbs 27, verse 2, it says, let another praise you and not your own mouth. A stranger and not your own lips. Let another praise you, not your own mouth. A stranger and not your own lips. If you ever catch yourself volunteering information about how good of a something you did, or about how good you are at something, or about some good deed, noble deed that you have done to somebody else or done in the past, remember this verse. Let another praise you, not your own mouth. A stranger, not your own lips. I'm going to close by looking at Philippians chapter 4. It just kind of gives these broad principles about where we should try to focus our thinking. I had another section on gossip, but we're not going to go over that today. We're going to close with Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8. The Bible tells us a lot of things to stay away from and to avoid, and thoughts or lusts or jealousy, those type of things, avoid them, stay away from them. Get them out of your life. Get them out of your heart or your mind. Well, Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, Paul tells the Christians what to think about, what kind of stuff to pursue. And so verse 8 says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And that's pretty open-ended. If there's anything that fits these categories, be intentional about thinking about it and meditating on that kind of stuff. Fill your thinking with these things. I appreciate your good attention tonight. I hope this lesson has been helpful to you in trying to understand how we should approach social media and some more technological type things as our world is becoming more and more gadgety and the technology keeps improving. There's going to be things that keep coming up in the Christian's life where we're going to have to constantly re-examine ourselves and think, okay, how do we approach this as a Christian? What are biblical principles that we're supposed to hold and think about when we participate in this type of avenue or this method or this website or this program? And there's going to be things that come up that we haven't thought about in that exact way before, or we're not accustomed to being aware of like what the pitfalls are here. And so as Christians, we always have to look at technology that we're using and be self-reflective and think about, why am I using this? What am I using it for? How does it help me as a Christian? How does it help other people as Christians? And how does it help people ultimately come to Jesus and glorify God? So I appreciate your good attention tonight. If there's anything that we can do for you to help you live as a Christian or become a Christian, you can be baptized tonight if you want, and have all your sins washed away, as if God completely deletes them from your life, to be a completely new person. You can do that tonight as we stand and as we sing.